everyone, welcome back. What is up? My name is Stephen and welcome to Stephen Flores Travel. I hope you all had a great weekend. I hope you all are having a great day. As you can probably tell by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about something really fun. As most of you may know, I lived in Europe for about 5 months in 2017. And during that time, I went and saw many countries. I actually saw 29 European countries and 1 African country. And going into that time abroad, the thing I really wanted to see more than anything were palaces and castles. For me, that just was like the signature of Europe. It was the one thing Europe had that every other place doesn't. And before I went, I saw pictures of beautiful palaces and castles scattered all throughout Europe, and I knew I wanted to see as many of them as I possibly could. So with that, I did see a couple, and I was able to make a top 10 of what my favorite castles were in all of Europe. Now, this isn't comprehensive because I didn't go to every single castle in Europe, and there are a bunch that I actually missed out on. But this is from my experience experiencing the about 20 to 25 different castles that I went to. Castles and palaces, I mean. So yeah, but before we get to the video, I just want to say if you like this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and comment down below. Also, don't forget to follow me on all my social media platforms at Stephen Flores for Facebook and at Stephen J. Flores for Twitter and Instagram. And as always, if you like this video and want to see more videos like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for me, will ya? So yeah, without further ado, let's move on with the video. So I'm just gonna skip to number 10 right now. And the palace or castle that I ranked at number 10 is the Sintra National Palace. It is the best preserved medieval royal palace in all of Portugal. It has a 1,000-year history, with it starting off as a Moorish palace, but it became the property of the Portuguese crown after the conquest of Lisbon, which was done by Alfonso Henriques. The nobility of Portugal resided there from the 15th to the 19th century. So the guy who crafted it from a Moorish palace into a medieval palace is King Jawa. I'm pronouncing this wrong. King Jawa the First. And because of that, none of the Moorish influences actually remain. Instead, there was a blended Manuelin style. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. Manuelin style, which was kind of like Portuguese Gothic, basically. What it's really known for are like these distinct conical chimneys that are like in the kitchen area. You can see them as you're like staring at it from the outside. Just these like huge cone-shaped things like jutting out from the middle of the palace. I really like that palace. It's not one of the most opulent palaces, and it's not like the most extravagant palace in the world, but it did have its like quirks and like it's really nice areas. Hopefully I can show you a picture of like this big room where there were like wall tiles surrounding it. I think in Portugal they call those azulejos, if I'm not mistaken. So there were these like blue and white tiles that just like surrounding the lower part of this room, and then in the upper part it was all wood, and there were carvings on each panel of wood, and it was amazing. So if you're in Lisbon and have a day trip planned for Sintra, I highly recommend seeing this palace. Next up at number 9 is the Royal Palace of Madrid in Spain. It is actually still currently in use by the King of Spain, and it was home to the kings of Spain from Charles III to Alfonso XIII. How this all started is Emir Mohammed I chose the city of Margaret, which was Madrid's Arabic name from long ago, as the site of a fortress to protect Toledo, which was then I think the central city in Moorish Spain. And they built a fortress in Margaret, or what is now known as Madrid, to defend Toledo from like invading Christians. After that, it was used by the kings of Castile until it finally became the Antigua Alcatar in the 14th century. And this palace was actually inspired by the Louvre in Paris, and it has over 3,000 rooms. Now I love this palace very much. This was actually a very good example of a very opulent castle. Like I remember there's this huge dining area that had like frescoes and like these like really beautiful drapes and carpeting and all of that, and each of the bedrooms was so magnificently like preserved in like its ornateness. Sad part about this, you can only take pictures in the entrance area when you're walking up the grand staircase, which from what I recall I think it has like 70 stairs, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, that's the only place where you can take pictures, but it's still a beautiful palace, and obviously when you're in Madrid, you have to see it. Also, if you can come when there's a parade, sometimes they have a, because like how it's structured is here's the palace, and like there's this huge open area. Sometimes they have military parades there, so like time it with your visit if you want to see that. Next up is the city of San Marino. I'm talking about the actual city because the actual city was kind of built like a castle, like it has these distinct towers and everything. So there are 3 basic towers in San Marino. The first, the Gita Tower, I think it's pronounced that way, was built in the 10th century, and it was rebuilt in the second half of the 15th century, and some parts were used as prisons until about October 1970. The second tower, the Sesta Tower, is built on the highest peak of Mount Titano, which by the way is the mountain that like San Marino surrounds. And that's where you also find Cesta Castle. It housed fortification guards divisions as well as some prison cells. Those are the only 2 towers that you can actually go to. The third one is closed and there's nothing really special in it. But I remember the Cesta Tower had like a medieval exhibit inside, which was pretty cool. I remember when I went, it was a foggy day. So when you got to the top, there's this beautiful rolling fog that was like falling towards the side of the cliff, which you can see here. Pretty amazing. Next up at number 7 is the Schonbrunn Palace in Vienna, Austria. In the mid-13th century, the land that it sits on was actually owned by a monastery. And at the time, it featured a small village. And at the time, the Katterberg, which was like this small castle kind of thing, was what sat on where Schonbrunn Palace is now. Emperor Maximilian II bought the land from the monastery at like 1500 something. And the land stayed with the Habsburgs until 1918. Maximilian turned the Katterberg into his own hunting estate, which actually was the precursor to why now there is a zoo there, and it's the world's oldest zoo if I remember correctly. Of course, when the monarchy ended in 1918, Schonbrunn was passed to the hands of the state. I personally love this palace. I don't think you were allowed to take pictures again, but I think the only palace that I thought was more opulent than this was the Palace of Versailles. But this palace was amazing and totally worth going to. If you have time in Vienna, please make this a priority. Number 6 is the Real Alcatar de Sevilla. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am. It was built by the Moorish rulers who occupied the country from the 8th century onwards. And the origins can be traced back all the way to 712, when the first occupations by Moorish conquest began in Seville. And the palace kind of became what it is today, when the Almohad Caliphate controlled the region. However, in the 13th century, the Spanish Reconquista happened, and soon enough, the palace fell into the hands of the Christians. This, to me, was one of the highlights of my Seville experience. It was amazing. And also, just saying, it was used as a filming location for Game of Thrones, which is pretty cool. It was Dorne, if I remember correctly. And I remember I spent like 3 or 4 hours there because I was just exploring everything and looking at the little nooks and crannies to find places. And it took me so long to find the really iconic like place. You know how like there's like this bath area where like there's these arches that are colored orange? That's the most iconic place. It took me so long to find, but I finally found it. Highly recommend if you go to Seville, do this. Now we're into our top 5, and at number 5 is the Tower of London. It was found by William the Conqueror after his victory in Hastings in the year 1066, I think. Using the Roman wall, or what was known afterwards as the London Wall, they built a mighty fortress so that they could subdue the people of London. So at first a wooden castle was built, and then they built this tower that became the centerpiece of the entire Tower of London. Also, the tower served a lot of other purposes when it was built. It was the royal mint for a while. And around the same time that the mint was made, it also kept the records of government. It was also said that whoever held the Tower of London held the whole city of London. So because of that, it was always targeted by rebels and everything. My experience at the Tower of London was I couldn't believe at first that I thought it was an actual tower, but it turned out to be like a castle, which I was like shocked by. I was like, I didn't know we were gonna go to a castle. But yeah, we saw some of the yeoman warders. We saw the crown jewels of England, which was pretty cool, I must say. And we just saw all these places with suits of armor and all of that. Literally one of the best places you could go to. It was amazing. We spent like a couple of hours there because I was just obsessed with seeing every possible thing. And yeah, it was great, and I highly recommend again that you go to it. I mean, like, who wouldn't go to the Tower of London, honestly? I mean, don't you want to see the crown jewels of England? But yeah, so moving on to number 4, we go to another castle in the United Kingdom up in Scotland called the Edinburgh Castle. It is one of the oldest fortified places in all of Europe. People in the Iron Age saw the military potential of like this one spot, given that it was so high up and everything. So they decided to build a fort on top of it. Because of its strategic location, it went under sieges a lot of times, and during the War for Independence, it switched hands so many times. It was also home to the kings and queens for many, many centuries. It's also home to the honors of Scotland, which are the oldest crown jewels in all of Britain. This is one of the funner castles. I had a lot of fun just like going to these secret passageways and like finding new viewpoints and all of that. Plus, if you look at it from the city, it's so imposing. Like literally the main part of Edinburgh is built on this hill, and it's like at the tallest part of the hill. And when you look at it, you're just like, wow, it's stunning. We are now down to our top 3, and number 3 is Prague Castle. Prague Castle was founded in the year 880 by Prince Bořivoj. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I probably didn't, but you know, worth a try. Early on, it was fortified by a moat and a rampart of like clay and stones. The first walled building was the Church of the Virgin Mary. Other ones dedicated to St. George and St. Vitus, I think, were made in the first half of the 10th century. From the 10th century onwards, Prague Castle wasn't just the seat of the head of state, which was a prince but then later was a king, but it was also the highest representative of the church. The Basilica of St. Vitus was the main castle church, and it has been since the 11th century. And yeah, this place was amazing. I remember my favorite memory from this place was I got to fire a crossbow for the first time in my entire life. But also, other than that, the St. Vitus Cathedral or St. Vitus Basilica, I can't remember, was amazing. Just this like beautiful church. I think it's one of the most beautiful churches I've ever seen in my entire life. Just absolutely gorgeous, and you have to see it when you go there. It's just a bit tiring to get to Prague Castle because kind of like Edinburgh Castle and some of these other castles, it's kind of built on like a hill. It's at the top of the hill, so you gotta hike all the way up there, but it is 100% worth it. Next up, we go back to Sintra in Portugal for my second favorite castle of all time, and that is the Moorish Castle. During the Moorish time, this castle actually defended the entire region. Its really high vantage point offered like really strategic views of like the sea. After the Christian Crusaders took back Portugal though, it was kind of left like kind of rot. But the beautiful natural setting of it convinced King Ferdinand to partially restore it. And up to now, it still maintains the tranquil and peaceful setting that King Ferdinand II wanted for it. It is my second favorite castle, more than all of these other castles, because of the views. The views from up there are amazing. I was there on a clear day and you could see for miles. I honestly can't believe it wasn't a real experience sometimes. It was just that gorgeous and amazing and beautiful. And now we are down to the undisputed best palace or castle in the entire Europe. You know, I haven't even seen a lot of the other castles, but I already am sure that this one is the best one in all of Europe, and that is the Palace of Versailles. It used to be King Louis XIII's hunting pavilion, but it was transformed by his son Louis XIV, and a succession of kings continued to embellish the palace until, of course, you know, the French Revolution. During the French Revolution in 1789, King Louis XVI was forced to leave Versailles for Paris, and after that, the palace would never again be a royal residence. But this palace is insane. Okay, let's talk about it first. First, you got the gardens. The gardens, by the way, are beautiful. I spent like 2 or 3 hours just like going through it. These amazing fountains and hedge mazes, and there's so much greenery and space, and it's so beautifully landscaped. And then you go inside the actual palace, and then you see the Hall of Mirrors. Mirrors at the time were like status symbols, and they had like a full-ass room of it. Floor-to-ceiling mirrors and chandeliers and all of that. And every single other room was just as fine and as extravagant and as opulent and as beautiful. It took us 7 hours to get through the whole thing because it was just so big and so amazing. We were all literally at a loss for words when we saw it. We were like, wow, this is why I came all the way to Europe. This is why I wanted to go all the way to France. It was just because I just saw one of the best things I've ever seen in my entire life. And yeah, that's all for my video today. Have you guys been to Europe? Have you guys seen some castles in Europe? Which ones do you recommend? I want to hear about them. Comment them down below. And yes, I will see you guys on Friday for our next video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like, click the subscribe button, like button down there. My last videos are to my left and to my right, and down in the description are my social media stuff. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Till next time, guys. See ya!